This woman has been in a coma for a year, but strangely, her soul was out of her body. The only person who can see her is David. After going through countless hardships, with David's help, Elizabeth finally finds her body. While wandering in the hospital, she discovers that her sister has brought her two nieces to see her. Her sister couldn't see her in her soul state either. Suddenly, the doctor came in and told her sister that Elizabeth had no hope of recovery and that they should remove the oxygen tube to end her painful life. And her sister wouldn't have to work so hard to earn high medical expenses anymore. Elizabeth immediately became anxious and shouted that she wasn't dead yet, she was still here. But her sister couldn't hear her voice no matter what. Fortunately, her sister angrily refused the doctor's suggestion in the end. She was her own sister and she would never give up on her until the very end. On the other hand, David returned to the house alone. Now that Elizabeth was gone, he finally felt free. He quietly made a dinner for himself and finished it in silence. But he felt like something was missing. The time he spent with Elizabeth made him forget about the sadness. Now, the sadness of his wife's passing came rushing back. But what he didn't expect was that Elizabeth came back at that moment. She said that she had almost had her oxygen tube removed and even her sister couldn't see her. In the end, only David could help. But David didn't know how to help her either. His wife's departure had shattered his world. Before Elizabeth appeared, he had been just drifting through each day. Now, the two broken people resonated with each other. For this reason, David took her to the outskirts. It was a garden that David had built. The garden was filled with the scent of flowers and bathed in sunlight. It was full of vibrant life. Elizabeth suddenly felt like she had dreamt of this place before. Somehow, they were destined to meet. But before they could think more about it, the real estate agent called David. The agent told him that he could extend the lease on the property because the original owner of the house, who had been in a coma for a long time, her sister couldn't afford the medical expenses anymore and decided to turn off her ventilator. Upon hearing the news, they hurriedly went to her sister's house. David lied and said he was Elizabeth's boyfriend and that she was still here, not dead. However, her sister thought he was insane, and even if he really was Elizabeth's boyfriend, he hadn't shown up for a whole year, so he should take responsibility for his lack of commitment. David was scared and ran away. Helplessly, Elizabeth calmly accepted everything. But David didn't want to give up. Elizabeth hadn't even figured out why she had an out-of-body experience. Could it be that there was still an unfulfilled wish? Elizabeth talked about her life. Because she worked so hard, she missed out on the beauty of the world. She didn't have any friendships or love. At the last moment, Elizabeth wanted to experience the feeling of being in love. They lay in bed, facing each other, unable to truly touch each other, but their hearts connected through their fingertips. They spent the night in bed together. In the end, David made a crazy decision. He wanted to go directly to the hospital and steal Elizabeth's body. He brought a friend along and drove to the hospital. When they arrived at the hospital, the friend realized something was off. David had no choice but to confess that Elizabeth's soul was right beside him. The friend didn't believe him, and David had to conduct an experiment to prove it.
Scissors.
Scissors.
Paper.
Paper.
Rock again.
Rock again.
He's flipping me off.
Are you flipping her off?
The friend reluctantly believed David's words for now, but was it really worth risking going to jail for a stranger?
I love her. I do, I love you.
Seeing this situation, the friend made up his mind and joined David. They sneaked into the hospital together. When they arrived at Elizabeth's room, the friend noticed that Elizabeth was the blind date he had introduced to David.
This is her. This is the woman I set you up with. This is the woman you stood up that night.
It turned out that after his wife passed away, the friend had been helping David to move on and arranged a blind date for him. But on that day, Elizabeth got into a car accident. However, even a car accident couldn't stop the two from meeting. As David was moving Elizabeth, he was caught. The guards chased after them, and in the chaos, Elizabeth's oxygen tube was removed. Her life signs slowly diminished, and her soul became more and more transparent. David refused to accept being separated like this and, in a desperate move, performed artificial respiration on Elizabeth. But Elizabeth still vanished right in front of him. David was also captured, and everything was in vain. But just at that moment, a miracle happened. Elizabeth's life signs miraculously recovered. However, she had forgotten the time she spent with David. When David reached out his hand, Elizabeth instinctively pulled back. The hope that had just ignited in his heart was extinguished in that moment. Even though he was reluctant, David had no choice but to leave. After a long time, Elizabeth returned home. Everything here was familiar to her, but she felt like something was missing. It wasn't until she stepped onto the terrace slowly that she realized it had become a garden. It was filled with the scent of flowers and bathed in the sunlight. David was also doing some final tidying up there. When he saw Elizabeth come back, he prepared to leave. But Elizabeth suddenly called out to him. David thought there might be a chance, but what Elizabeth really wanted was just to get back her spare key. David sheepishly took out the key and gave it to her. The garden at this moment awakened Elizabeth's memories. This scene seemed to have been experienced in a dream. Just as she received the key, Elizabeth remembered everything. It turned out that all of this was not just a dream. They had saved each other. This movie is dedicated to those who believe in soulmates. No matter how many difficulties they face, they will eventually meet each other. There is no substitute for the original movie. A good film is worth watching it yourself. But you don't know where you can watch these movies? Use Superbox. With Superbox, you can access all live TV channels in 4K quality. It also provides access to over 13,000 movies and series, and updates with the newest content very often. The total cost for one of these is 2 months of your cable bill. Then you never have to pay fees or bills ever again. Click the link in my bio and use my code to get it at a better price.